Vikings fans, that weird tension hanging over this franchise again. The kind that only shows up when the Vikings are standing at another crossroads. There's excitement, there's hope, but there's also that familiar feeling in the pit of your stomach because some of the biggest decisions shaping this team right now could define the next 5 years of Vikings football. And honestly, one quarterback situation developing in Minnesota suddenly feels a whole lot more uncomfortable than anybody expected. There's a hole on this roster that people keep pretending isn't there. And the scary part is, Brian Flores knows it's there. You don't lose a player like Jonathan Greenard and just magically replace him overnight. You can talk about Dallas Turner's development all you want, and trust me, that kid looks like he's becoming a monster. But depth matters in this league, especially in Flores' defense. Especially when this team is trying to survive in a division loaded with quarterbacks that can torch you if you give them time. One bad protection breakdown in this division can flip an entire game. That's why this latest free agency rumor feels a lot more important than people realize. Because while Chicago is apparently being floated as a possible landing spot for an aging pass rusher, Minnesota honestly makes way more sense. And yeah, we're talking about Von Miller, 37 years old, 7-time All-Pro. A guy who's not the same player anymore, but still managed 9 sacks last season and continued creating pressure when it mattered. The Bears may want him because of injuries to Dayo Odeyingbo and Shamar Turner, but their system asks for something different. They need edge-setting defensive ends in that 4-3 look. Flores wants chaos. He wants specialized pressure packages. He wants waves of pass rushers attacking from everywhere. That's where Miller still has value. You put him into obvious passing downs alongside Dallas Turner and Alex Van Ginkel, and suddenly offensive coordinators are stressed again. Suddenly protections start shifting, and honestly, after watching this secondary struggle at times last season, Minnesota cannot afford to let quarterbacks sit comfortably in the pocket. That's what makes this feel real. It's not about bringing in a superstar version of Von Miller. That guy's gone. This is about finding one more dangerous veteran who can still wreck a drive in January. Spot Rack projecting him around $5.8 million. That's manageable. Rob Brzezinski can work around that. The cap hit isn't the scary part. The risk is whether you're investing in a final push or chasing a version of a player that no longer exists. But the bigger question is whether the Vikings believe this roster is close enough to justify one more veteran swing. Because if they do, this defense might not be finished evolving yet. One thing this organization quietly does better than almost anybody in football, finding hungry players after the draft ends. Seriously, some teams treat undrafted free agency like an afterthought. The Vikings don't. And when those contract guarantees started leaking out this week, 3 names immediately jumped off the page because Minnesota doesn't hand out that kind of money unless they see something real. Dillon Bell, Tristan Leigh, Monkell Goodwine. Those 3 got nearly $250,000 guaranteed, and that tells you Kevin O'Connell and this staff already believe these guys have a legitimate chance to stick around. Bell might be the most fascinating one. At first glance, he looks like another depth receiver fighting for scraps. But then you actually watch the tape from Georgia and realize this dude lines up everywhere. Receiver, running back, slot, outside, gadget packages, special teams, and suddenly you start imagining what O'Connell could do with somebody built like a running back but moving around like a chess piece. Defenses hate players they can't identify before the snap. Minnesota loves versatility, loves intelligence, loves guys willing to do ugly work. Bell fits that culture. Then there's Tristan Leigh, and honestly, Vikings fans are probably going to fall in love with this kid during preseason. Former 5-star recruit, massive wingspan, athletic as hell. Leadership background, team captain, the kind of developmental tackle coaches dream about molding. Technique can improve. Physical gifts like that, you can't teach those. And after years of this fan base begging for offensive line stability, people are going to be watching every snap he takes this summer because roster battles along the offensive line always become emotional in Minnesota. But the one that really feels like classic Flores territory, Monkell Goodwine. Even the name sounds like a rotational defensive tackle built for trench warfare. 6'3", 319 pounds. Didn't start much in college, but flashed enough physicality that Minnesota clearly saw potential worth investing in. Sometimes Flores just wants violent depth up front. And here's the thing Vikings fans should never forget. Jalen Redmond was once an overlooked undrafted guy too. Now he's one of the emotional heartbeat players on this defense after putting up 6 sacks and becoming a legitimate contributor. Kevin O'Connell practically glows when he talks about Redmond's development. That's why these stories matter. Every summer, there's a player nobody expects who claws his way into this roster and changes the energy of camp. Maybe one of these guys is next. Maybe training camp gets a whole lot more competitive than people think. You want to know what makes this quarterback situation feel so uncomfortable right now? It's not just the competition. It's the perception, because when Kyler Murray signed that tiny one-year deal to come to Minnesota, most people celebrated it like a steal. And financially, it absolutely was. A former Pro Bowl quarterback for basically backup money? Of course you do that. But then Adam Schefter dropped something that completely changed the emotional temperature around this thing. According to league sources, Murray may have specifically targeted Minnesota because he believes he can beat out J.J. McCarthy. Think about that for a second. That's not outside media doubting McCarthy. That's an established NFL quarterback looking at the Vikings roster and seeing vulnerability, seeing opportunity, seeing weakness. And honestly, can you fully blame him? McCarthy missed his rookie season injured, then came back and looked shaky last year. 11 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, under 60% passing. Vikings fans defended him because we wanted to believe patience would pay off, but now, the organization itself almost feels uncertain, and fans can sense it. Sam Darnold leaves and wins a Super Bowl in Seattle. Daniel Jones is gone. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah loses his job partly because this quarterback plan never stabilized. And suddenly, McCarthy is standing in the middle of enormous pressure entering year 3. Every throw in camp is going to get analyzed. What makes this harder is that Kyler Murray isn't some washed-up backup with no pedigree. He's talented, dynamic, dangerous outside structure. The problem is, Kevin O'Connell's entire offensive identity has historically worked best with traditional pocket passers. Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, Sam Darnold during that magical run. Timing, rhythm, structure. Murray plays chaos football. Incredible chaos sometimes, but chaos nonetheless. And when chaos works, it looks unstoppable. When it doesn't, drives die fast. So now O'Connell has to prove something he's never really had to prove before. Can he adapt his offense around a quarterback who freelances constantly? Because this season suddenly carries enormous stakes for everybody involved. If Murray struggles, critics will hammer O'Connell's offensive genius label. If Murray succeeds, Minnesota could get trapped paying huge money to a quarterback with durability concerns. And somewhere in the background of all this sits J.J. McCarthy, watching his future slowly become uncertain in front of the entire league. And honestly, that's the part of all this that keeps hitting me emotionally. This franchise keeps searching for stability at quarterback while simultaneously building one of the most talented rosters we've seen in years. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson, Dallas Turner ascending, Flores building a violent defense. There's too much talent here for Minnesota to drift into another quarterback identity crisis. That's why every move suddenly feels heavier, every rumor feels bigger, every training camp rep is going to get dissected like a playoff game because the margin for error suddenly feels tiny. The Purple Faithful have lived through too many almost eras already. We know how quickly hope can disappear in this league, but we also know something else. When this franchise finally gets the right combination of leadership, toughness, and quarterback play together, the entire NFC starts looking over its shoulder. So keep your eyes on this summer, Vikings Nation. Something important is building here. Maybe beautifully, maybe dangerously, maybe both. Stay tuned. Skol Vikings, let's go!